The MoorishDirectory.com is very pleased to have received the film you're about to review from an extremely talented, newly rising Moorish documentarian, a producer who many of you may be most familiar with from his weekly co-hosting activities on the very popular Tuesday evening Moorish blog talk radio program Eyes Wide Open, featuring their collaborative co-host and host, Sister Anaida L. of MoorishNationPublicRecords.com, and of course, Roz Mariah Bey of the very well-known Moorish online institution of higher learning, R.V. Bey Publications, and her son, the producer of this film, Ms. Mahim, who also hosts, along with my good friend and Sheikh of Canaanland, Moorish Science Temple number 5, Cujo Al-Waldo L, who both of them actually together also host the blog talk radio program Sons of Allah. Now, following my first viewing of this film, I thought that it would be most appropriate, due to the educational content of this film, to dedicate this very important body of work to two extremely important individuals in my life, my granddaughter, Mia, and my grandson, Jamani, who happened to reside just outside of Washington, D.C., where this body of work was filmed. I'm dedicating this film to those two very important people, Jamani and Mia, because I believe how important it is that films of this kind are shown to our children. And I believe that parents should sit down along with them and view this type of educational material. So without any further ado, please do enjoy this excellent production and reveal on our true history, which is much different in its reality than his story.
Today, as so many generations have before, we gather on our national mall to tell an essential part of our American story, one that has at times been overlooked. We come not just for today, but for all time.
Today, the quote-unquote African-American Museum was opened up. How do you feel about that, number one? Number two, do you think it's the right word to dedicate a museum to our people? And the reason I'm asking you that is because if you look at our history, it's like our quote-unquote name changes every 20 years or so. Meaning we've been called Negroes, we've been called black people, we've been called colored people, we've been called African American, we've been called niggas, you know what I mean? Which I can't say everything applies. Do you feel like African American is the right word for our people? And if so, why?
Laura's been very much engaged in this museum for a long time. She sits on the board, and we're honored to be here. My first reaction is, I hope all our fellow citizens come and look at this place. It is fabulous.
This whole thing was put together by George Bush 13 years ago, and now it just came to fruition. But look at where we're at now and where we was at then, right?
We're here in part because of you and because of all those Americans. The Civil War vets, the civil rights foot soldiers, the champions of this effort on Capitol Hill, who for more than a century kept the dream of this museum alive.
It took this long for this shit to happen? Like, come on, man.
Mr. President and First Lady, Vice President, Chief Justice, David, thank you very much, the board. I do want to give a shout out to Lonnie. It's really important to understand this project would not and could not have happened without his drive, his energy, and his optimism.
Of course, our our history goes way beyond the term of African American. You know, our history is much longer than this museum could possibly capture, probably than anyone could possibly capture. You know.
You know, it'd be fair to say that the Congress and I did not always see eye to eye, if you know what I mean, Mr. President. But this was one issue where we strongly agreed. I was honored to sign the bill authorizing the construction of this national treasure.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the museum. You heard what they said. Oh, it was permitted for them to build this museum. It shouldn't have been permitted shit.
Right, real talk.
Because permitted means I allowed you to do it. If I didn't give you permit, you wouldn't be doing it.
And I'm pleased it now stands where it has always belonged, on the National Mall. This museum is an important addition to our country for many reasons. Here are three. First, it shows our commitment to truth. Great Nation does not hide its history. It faces its flaws and corrects them. I thought an interesting comment was made when somebody said to me, I heard somebody say, you know, where's Mandela? Well, Mandela's dead because Saddam Hussein killed all the Mandelas. He was a brutal tyrant that divided people up and split families, and people are recovering from this. So there's a psychological recovery that is taking place, and it's hard work for him, and I understand it's hard work for him.
Nelson Mandela's given name, Holy Hlahla, literally means tugging at the branches of a tree. But at school, he was given the name of another famous leader.
When I went to school, the lady teacher, Miss Mdingane, asked, what is your name? I told her my African name, Holy Hlahla. She says, no, I don't want that one. You must have a Christian name. So I say, no, I don't have one. She says, from today, you are going to be Nelson.
So henceforth, he would be known to the world as Nelson Mandela.
Great Nation does not hide its history. It faces its flaws and corrects them.
This is a learning history.
The lesson of this museum is all that all Americans
70s, 60s, 30s, or whatever. This is a history lesson.
Absolutely.
This is truly a history lesson. And hopefully, I would hope that people look at this museum and see all that's there, see all that we have accomplished, how powerful we are, and look even further, be encouraged to look even further into it, to go back further. And like I said, I haven't been inside myself, so I don't know how much how much they try to get at that our history is much longer than just our time here.
Yes.
But I'm hoping that people are encouraged to explore that even more from the sense of pride that they get.
Yes.
Shirley Chisholm, first to be in the Senate.
Hold on. Okay.
Her mom was
Savages, right at the top.
at the top. Yeah. She goes all of these here.
Does that say it on there?
It says it on this explanation.
Okay, can you point that to me?
Right here. Savages of several nations. Remember in Ellis Island, they had said that there were 200 different cultures here already?
Yeah.
So when they say here's a picture of savages of several nations, what are they talking about? I mean, that's what they say, but it was 200 cultures of one nation.
Right.
That's the thing we need to understand now. What I'm finding interesting and just coming in is that they're portraying the African slave trade that touched ground here. Now, when are we going to display the original slaves, which were modern Europeans, here?
We say around here, we we're talking North America, right?
Yeah, North America.
Northwest
You
Submission.
know, that story has to be told.
Right on.
Because then that will help us understand why they even did and felt and what they did. Because the African slave trade came in on the fourth leg of their conquest intent. Fourth leg was the enslavement of African slaves. You won't know that unless you go to Ellis Island, and that's where you see that at.
Indeed.
Remember?
All right, let's get to some more. Hold up. Say that again.
Shirley Chisholm. She's from Brooklyn. I didn't see that, or, you know, and it was the first person to be in, I think it was a Senate position in 1972. That is their sister right there.
What, like, point it out.
Shirley Chisholm.
With the peace sign up?
Yes, with the peace sign up. This is in the 72. Now, my mother was living at that time, so I remember how proud and how much she really, you know, admired the fact that this sister was in these positions.
I'd like to have your opinion of what's happening in this country. You know, we can date back to even George Lincoln Rockwell, John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers. You can go right on through them. Bobby Kennedy, George Wallace. People are being shot down in public life. Do you have any observations on that?
This country is moving in the direction that Rome moved before it fell. This country is moving in the direction that Rome moved before it fell.
What I have come up with that we are under now is the Nazi German Judeo-Christian European alliance of the Holy Roman Empire that does all of this damage under the name of the United States of America. And the people of America, the true Americans, have no idea what's going on. They have no idea why it's going on. This particular corporation that we call a country has subjects and citizens that are the least informed persons on this planet.
This country is moving in the direction that Rome moved before it fell. There is a malaise in this country, a malaise that has to do with the fact that human life is not that important any longer.
In Tulsa, Oklahoma, they said that she reacted. They're charging her with first-degree manslaughter, and I didn't understand why it was a first-degree
That ain't nothing.
murder.
Right.
Because even though if she gets charged, she's charged, but if they find her guilty, she can just do 4 years.
Right.
She took a father and a husband of 4 kids, and now that mother got to struggle. We as a community got to help her. But because honestly, why did they call a helicopter and cops for a man whose car just stalled on a highway road? And then also, how did they find him that fast? Were they already following him?
Humanitarianism, one's relationships and one's reaction to other human beings who might differ in political philosophy, ideology, or even religious beliefs, is not given serious consideration in terms of the fact that people have a right to dissent and people have a right to differ. I think also there is a kind of feeling in this country where many people have really become more and more upset as the war continues in Vietnam.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some darker people or some poor, hungry people in the mud for big, powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality.
And the reason I say that is because for many young men in this country, there's no future. They can't plan a future in terms of their own careers and their own lives. There's this unsettled state as to what is really going to happen to them in their future because our country's been continuing in this war for 8 years. There's a discontent on the part of the American people who are paying in their tax dollars into the Treasury. And 70 cents out of every dollar is still going into defense or defense-related activities, and they can't get the expansion of hospital facilities, mental hygiene facilities, and the kinds of things that they work hard for and put their money in terms of their taxes and do not get it in return. There is a discontent and a malaise that is going on in this country that is going to destroy all of us.
I think it's very interesting that you liken this to Rome before Rome fell. Isn't it true that Caesar was assassinated by the people closest to him?
That's right.
Are you making that same same kind of an analogy?
I am.
Do you have any doubts in your mind about the conclusions of the Warren Commission report regarding the assassination of President Kennedy?
I happen to be a Democrat.
Okay.
All right. Once upon a time, I worked in John F. Kennedy's campaign when I was 16.
Okay.
If he were alive today and he wanted to be president, he couldn't get through my primary.
Right.
The more I think about the assassination of Kennedy, the Kennedy brothers, and the assassination of others, I just seem to have a feeling that there is a deliberate attempt in this country to have this country taken over by certain kinds of forces, and that's all I am going to say.
Then you have Thurgood Marshall. You saw his, but his date was, well, see, they notate everything here that's on this wall was notated here. So Thurgood Marshall is Supreme Court Justice 1961. Now, remember, his mother made him read the Constitution as punishment.
We're talking about children were killed and beaten because they learned how to read the book.
Right.
And how dare they, this day and age, not read a book.
All that information on the internet.
And you look back at what Rosa Parks, all of them went through, Martin Luther King, all of them went through for us to be standing here today.
Right.
And you won't read your history.
Right.
And they, even if they're not teaching in school, there's a library. You can't take what you got up here.
Indeed. So.
And if you ain't got it up there.
And she came in 72.
Yes. For me, this 70s, 60s, 30s, or whatever, this is a history lesson.
Absolutely.
This is truly a history lesson.
Now, I also noticed this magazine called The Crisis. Did you see it? 1918. Now, here it is right here. Right here. 1918. It's called The Crisis. And that's what the NAACP calls their magazine, Crisis.
Oh, really?
Yes. They don't, I don't know if they even print it anymore. It doesn't say NAACP, so I'm not sure that is the one that might be the prototype they came from, because it doesn't have it on it, but everyone knows that the NAACP originally was the Niagara movement.
Right on.
That came in about what was it, 1909, excuse me, after the so-called race war they had, which I think is behind the activity of pushing the women, the American women, off of the Niagara Falls. Because their movement was called the Niagara Movement. And then they had a so-called race riot, and it shut down and came back up with W.E. Du Bois as the head of it. But really behind it were a bunch of immigrants that we call Jews, so-called Jewish people.
So members of the Jewish community, he has to bow now. And deny his brother to get a cheap position with the enemy.
And in the charter, it says that they cannot own land. To this day, all of the people who are in an NAACP, if they go to their local charter asked to read it, it still maintains that same fact. This is why they always have to rent a room or rent a building. They cannot own any property. So we know that can never change the economic situation of our people. We agree to that. So,
and is that because they're in the status of Negroes?
Most of you Negroes. I'm not insulting you, I'm just saying you're dead. That's what Negro and nigger means.
That's because the charter that they signed and agreed to, yes, it is because of that, but the charter that they signed and agreed to, which still stands today, also included that status position in it to ensure that even once you found out that you're not a Negro, colored, or black, right, that if you're in that group that seems to be doing so much for the people but cannot own property, so therefore they can't have the economic situation of the people at all.
True.
Or social, really.
Yeah.
But so it got named to that. So to this day, it still is that. And yes, it is because that charter agreement was to maintain or keep people in that status.
Indeed. All right.
Artifacts you've seen, Pullman rail car, Rosa Parks' breath, all of that. No, it's engaging. European.
Oh, their participation in it.
Their participation in it, yeah. One side is Europe, you'll see, and the other side is exactly. Then the third level is civil rights. Okay. Ending with the election of President Obama. So, you know, it gets much happier as you ascend. Okay? So you go at your own pace. You can start if you want with film straight ahead. You're able to
I saw it up there on the concrete building.
No, not this one. There's another film.
Yeah,
This one's different.
I didn't see the film. I was wondering where it was.
Hey, boy, I admit.
I have that picture.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
It's supposed to be the Queen of Sheba.
Hey, Barb.
I admit I am sinking at the purchase of slaves, but I must be mum. For how can we do without sugar or rum?
Say that again.
I admit I am sickened at the purchase of slaves.
Do you know where the word slave came from? It actually came from the word Slav. Slav. The Slavic people in Central Europe. They were enslaved during the Middle Ages. Every time they'd lose a war, everybody would round them up and enslave them. Slav. Slavery. It didn't become race until much, much later.
I admit I am sickened at the purchase of slaves, but I must be mum. For how could we do without sugar or rum?
So we weren't necessarily, quote unquote, slaves like that.
Do you know where the word slave came from? It actually came from the word Slav. Slav. The Slavic people in Central Europe.
Right. You know what I mean? But that's the narrative that they give the people, which is not always right and exact.
So basically, I want to talk to you about plantation thoughts today. Plantation thoughts.
She was on the green and the crown, and I thought she was
yeah. No, Queen. They used that painting for the Queen of Sheba.
Queen of Sheba, right?
Yeah, or Queen Sheba. Pardon. Oh yeah.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna check out some other ones. Hey ma, yeah, I'm going to see. Look, come check this out. Just read that first paragraph.
In the 1400s, Africans did not see themselves as African.
You can stop right there.
Now this is what the deal is. The people that are the true Americans in this country call themselves African American, Negro, Black, colored people. Now, one of the things they wanted me to share with you guys.
Now, how did the Moors become known as Africans? We are not Africans, and we're not African Americans. Scipio Africanus, a Roman general, was fighting the Barker Bay family, which you know as Hannibal, Hasdrubal, etc. When they defeated him, he poisoned himself rather than give up, by the way. Anyway, when they defeated them, he put his name on the northwest coast of Kibalan, or Tameri, that's called Africa today. Do you understand? Not the continent. Near Tunis, Algiers, what you call Morocco, the kingdom. You understand? Kingdom is subordinate to empire. That area, just that part, was called Africanus, after Scipio, the god general. All right? Who's given the honor for defeating the great Moors. They weren't totally defeated. That was that area. All right? Now you got to also look at these. I'm giving you different points of history so that you can look into them and see yourself and see the motives of how you got where you are.
You can stop right there. And just for the record, where we at right now?
We are at the newly established African American Museum at D.C., Washington, D.C.
And in
North
here,
American continent.
on the continent of North America, our ancestral state, and they telling you sleepy-headed Moors in the 1400s, Africans did not see themselves as African. The continent included many city and nation states. And like Europe, it was made up of diverse societies. I'm going to let you read the rest. I'll keep that on the screen for a minute.
Okay, the people of one region might have little in common with their neighbors. The majority of it, that's because it's diverse societies, the majority of enslaved Africans came from the western coast. These regions were known for their centers of learning.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S. From 711 until 1485, 774 years, when we built and brought into Europe the university system, building the University of Salamanca, S-A-L-A-M-A-N-C-A in Spain, a copy of the University of Genet from ancient Ghana, which was equally a copy of the University of Sankore in Tombouctou, which the French later called Timbuktu. Now, look, if you want to read it, read Stanley Lane Poole's The Moors in Spain, written in 1887, or Alejandro Macaziza. Read his book in Spanish, The Moors in Spain.
Military prowess.
The military hold on Spain was African. Now let's look at the Africans and the Arabs, that combination called Moors in Spain.
Vast empires and diverse faiths. They treated the societies as far away as Asia and Europe. See, slavery was everywhere, and we literally mean everywhere. When I saw on the screen the Leo Africanus, we realized it was gold in Africa.
Yeah.
Let's read this. More than 1400, slavery was everywhere. The trade in gold, salt, and spices far exceeded the trade in slaves. Remember, I told you we mine for cellular tissue salts out of the earth.
Yeah.
That's why they would say you're the salt of the earth. Look at this. Slavery was not based on perceptions of race.
But I asked the other day when we were in these meetings, does anybody know how slavery started? We know the ending. How did it start? I mean, nobody came in and said, hey, everybody, let's have slaves. That doesn't sound like that could happen. The real insidiousness lies in the fact that it all started small and advanced into one of the worst scars in American history and global history.
More than 1400, slavery was everywhere.
I mean, it's a human atrocity. And it's happened time and time again. At first, slavery wasn't full-blown slavery. In fact, in the early colonial America, it wasn't slavery. It was indentured servitude. Now, what is indentured servitude? Well, indentured servitude is not the same as slavery. I mean, there's some important differences here.
Slavery was a temporary status.
In theory, indentured servitude is like that, but indentured servitude promised a light at the end of the tunnel. Because after your contract with the master was up, you got what were called at the time freedom dues. That was usually a little bit of land and a gun. Most important part of freedom dues was freedom.
Slavery was a temporary status.
Indentured servitude was a common practice throughout the globe at the time. The English, the Spanish, the Portuguese, everybody was using this indentured servitude. It was like slavery, but not quite, and it's not an American problem. It's a human problem that happened all over the world.
Slavery was everywhere.
Now, there were criteria on which people were used as early indentured servants. But here's what's not taught. If I said to you, was it a white man or a black man that was the master and the indentured servant, you would say it was like this. But the criteria at the beginning was not based on color. It was based on creed. It was non-Christians that were used as servants. It was non-Christians that were used as servants.
I told him my African name, Kholiklas. He says, no, I don't want that one. You must have a Christian name.
It was non-Christians that were used as servants.
So I say, no, I don't have one. She says, from today, you're going to be Nelson.
Colonists didn't identify themselves as white. They identified themselves as Englishmen or Christians.
Look at this. Slavery was not based on perceptions of race.
In fact, if an indentured servant broke a contract, they got the same punishment regardless of color. I mean, if this guy was the owner, this guy ran away, same thing as if this guy ran away. It was Christianity. That's how it was. And if you were Christian, you just said, I accept Jesus, you could get out. I honestly don't know why more people didn't say, I accept Jesus. You really didn't want to do it.
You hike.
Only on the days I'm not in church.
Oh, who's your pastor?
Oh, Bishop Don Magic Wand.
Never heard of him.
Good.
Now, do you know who owned the first state-sponsored slave in America? Who owned? Who was this guy? It puts a slave. You know who it was? His name was Anthony Johnson, except he wasn't a white man. He, believe it or not, was a black man. You ever heard that? How did a black man own a black man? Well, let's start with him. Before he was an owner, what was he? He was an indentured servant. He was a black indentured servant, not a slave. He worked in Virginia, 1621. It's recorded in the census. His name was Antonio. It just recorded his first name and his race. Well, he wasn't considered a slave. He was an indentured servant. He decided that he was going to become an owner. He changed his name to Anthony Johnson. And in 1640, Anthony and his wife bought a plot of land and hired, not slaves, because there weren't slaves yet, he hired indentured servants.
Slavery was a temporary status. Slavery was a temporary status. Slavery was a temporary status.
Whoa, talk to him.
Look at this. The Atlantic Creoles, people of African descent who move easily between cultures and across landscapes, often born in port cities. They were multilingual and familiar with international trade. They served as liaisons, interpreters, diplomats, and missionaries. As cultural mediators, they effectively navigated all sides of the Atlantic world and helped it come into being. This fluidity demonstrates that status was not yet firmly tied to ideas of race during this early period. This fluidity demonstrates that status was not yet firmly tied to ideas of race during this early period.
Got him. Alright, let's keep it moving. In your face. Thank you, bro. Look, check this one out. Enslaved Africans in Europe. Read that. There's a lot of this one right here. Enslaved Africans in Europe.
This is interesting. It says slave owners in Europe distinguished themselves from slave owners in Americas, whom they saw as inhumane. However, this did not mean Europeans considered slavery immoral. In fact, fashionable Europeans owned enslaved African children as well-dressed attendants adorned in restraining collars. In Europe and the Americas, slaveholders found many ways to justify slavery, including church-sanctioned interpretations of the Bible.
The Lord said, "The fear of ye and the dread of ye shall be on every beast of the earth."
Good evening from New York. At a meeting with Palestinian leaders in June 2003, then President Bush reportedly having claimed that God told him to go to war. Mr. Bush reported as having said, quote, "God would tell me, George, go and fight those terrorists in Afghanistan, and I did. And then God would tell me, George, go and end the tyranny in Iraq, and I did." Our fifth story on the countdown, it turns out that God received a rather hefty assist from Donald Rumsfeld. Newly released memos showing that Mr. Bush's defense secretary, having placed on the cover of his daily reports to the president biblical passages.
In Europe and the Americas, slaveholders found many ways to justify slavery, including church-sanctioned interpretations of the Bible.
And corresponding war imagery that carefully framed the mission in Iraq as nothing less than a Christian crusade.
You know, I'm leading with the evangelicals. I'm a good Christian, and I'm leading with the evangelicals.
The dangers of sectarianism are greater than ever. Whatever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation.
How did this country get to be a Christian nation? I've read a lot of quotes from all the founding fathers. There are a lot of quotes that explicitly say we're not a Christian nation.
And I want to tell you something. Christianity, and I put it in the same vein and sometimes in the same sentences, Christianity is being chipped away at in this country. In this country. It's being chipped away at, and I'm not going to let it happen.
And even if we did have only Christians in our midst, if we expelled every non-Christian from the United States of America, whose Christianity would we teach in the schools? Would it be James Dobson's or Al Sharpton's?
In Europe and the Americas, slaveholders found many ways to justify slavery, including church-sanctioned interpretations of the Bible.
Which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay, and that eating shellfish is an abomination? Or we could go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith? Or should we just stick to the Sermon on the Mount, a passage that is so radical that it's doubtful that our own Defense Department would survive its application?
When people talk about we need a temporary ban on Muslims until we find out what is going on here, okay? There is total outrage. When people talk about Christians and Christianity, there's no outrage.
The world is going to be the world, and the church is going to be the church, and you have to understand the difference. The Supreme Court is there to make a decision based on constitutional rights and legalities that fit all Americans. They are not debating Scripture. They're just not debating Scripture. I guarantee you that they weren't in there looking at Romans 1 and 1 Corinthians 6 and weighing it against the policies.
When people talk about Christians and Christianity, no outrage.
We have bought into all of this rhetoric about America being a Christian nation.
We tend to lionize these guys and think of them all as like the 12 apostles plus the founding fathers, like they're in the same club or something, when in fact these men understood very well that there was a difference between being Christian and being American.
I like to say that America has a lot of Christians in it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a Christian nation. This is not a theocratic form of government.
I was in Trump Tower. I pointed down to the sidewalk. There were people walking on the sidewalk. I said, then those people walking on the sidewalk are more powerful than you people in the clergy, the pastors, the ministers, the priests, the people in the clergy. They're more powerful. They said, that's right. I said, not going to happen anymore. We're going to get rid of that thing. I want Christianity to have a strong flavor. Why did we ever pass a thing like that?
Colonists didn't identify themselves as white. They identified themselves as Englishmen or Christians.
I want Christianity to have a strong flavor. Why did we ever pass a thing like that?
In a society governed by the people, no wrong lasts forever.
So before we get carried away, let's read our Bibles now.
Right. I mean, the last time the DNC met in 2012, they actually tried to remove God from the platform. Obama called up and said, are you crazy? You want to cost me this election?
Right.
And they nixed that.
Before we get carried away, let's read our Bibles now. Scripture promised that if we lift up the oppressed, then our light will rise in the darkness, and our night will become like the noonday. And the story contained in this museum makes those words prophecy.
I don't know if you remember when Barack first got in the office, he went to Cairo, Egypt, and he did a speech about the first nation to recognize his country, being the Moorish.
The first nation to recognize my country was Morocco. In signing the Treaty of Tripoli in 1796, our second president, John Adams, wrote, "The United States has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims."
Also, different contributions Moors made to society and things of that nature.
And since our founding, American Muslims have enriched the United States. They have fought in our wars, they have served in our government, they have stood for civil rights, they have started businesses, they have taught at our universities, they've excelled in our sports arenas, they've won Nobel Prizes, built our tallest building, and lit the Olympic torch. And when the first Muslim American was recently elected to Congress, he took the oath to defend our Constitution using the same Holy Quran that one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, kept in his personal library.
Over here, you can put the rust that America Vespucci found on the land unexplored. It doesn't mean that it's there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they admit that natives were here, so how can they be the Americans if the natives are there? You know what I mean? It says that he was an Italian explorer.
Can you just move down just a little bit?
Cartographer. He proved that Columbus did not travel to Asia, but rather reached present-day Brazil and the West Indies, what they call the West Indies. In 1507, for the first time, a map maker included the word America on a map of the Western Hemisphere in honor of Vespucci. Okay? Vespucci's letter, because it wasn't important.
Excuse me, can you just move down just a little bit so I can get that?
You're pushing her up.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to, but I got
okay, she's on this side. You want to push her. Okay. Vespucci's letters also informed the European public
about unexplored new lands and their native people. So there were natives here. It's not hidden.
Right
So
on.
they're the true Americans, not anybody coming from Italy, Europe, Germany, or whatever.
Exactly. Well said. I'm going to hit another wing.
And one other thing. We tell people that Christopher Columbus never hit North America. Here's proof. Right here. About Christopher Columbus. His expedition was part of a series of events that transferred Europe, Africa, and the Americas. His travels were intended to open the Asian spice trade for Spain. But in 1492, Columbus landed in the what? Bahamas.
Traveled to modern-day Cuba, and ultimately established a settlement in Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. Now look, so the Haitians...
Got hit first by Columbus.
But look, in modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, man, this was the same land. It still is.
It's an education thing. So if you see a Dominican or a Puerto Rican and they're saying that they're not black, what they're really saying is that they're proud of their culture. They love to be Dominican. It's not that they are. Some are racist, but some are not. Most are not. So the ones that you may run into in New York, in New Jersey, they trying to disassociate themselves from quote-unquote black people only because they are proud of the culture. And so when you say black, in their mind, you're thinking of black American.
So black ain't even, it's not even that deep anyway, you know? It's very subjective, you know?
Yeah.
Black, you're only saying so much about somebody. You're only talking about their appearance. You're not saying anything about their ethnicity, their history,
None of
their
that.
DNA. It's purely appearance.
Yes.
They know that, but when you say black, you have to understand that you're saying black as in black American. And that's what the whole world believes. Instead of understanding that black is a color. So many of these people know that they're African descendants, but many of them, they deny that. They deny that because of the things that happened a long time ago with President Trujillo, with the murdering of 15 to 20,000 Haitians, because this is the same island. This is on the same island as Haiti. So there's a big dislike, or there's a big controversy, or there's problems between Dominican and Haiti.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So they're the same people. Really.
And all of them died. Here it is. This is affirmed at Ellis Island that the disease they brought killed the people. Here it is.
Yeah.
The people of Hispaniola had died from disease and abuse, prompting the import of African slaves to replace their labor in the sugar field, because when they came, they brought disease.
Absolutely.
This tells you why certain books are actually rare books. We're talking about stuff printed 1747. Right? Now this guy right here, Ukasa Graniosa, which is an African prince who was freed though. He became a slave, so he began. Apparently, from this, it's clear, and I'm going to read it. It's short, but it's clear that because he was freed by a Calvinist minister who taught him to read, taught him Christianity and to read, he felt kind of beholden to him, and so he wasn't against slavery so much. He served as propaganda for the slave trade. So, I've never heard of this guy. This is interesting. Ukasa Graniosa, or James Albert, so that's the tag name they put on him.
Well, yeah, they gotta hit him with a nom de guerre in history. But now, if you don't know anything, James Albert sounds like a European or Englishman.
Right, but it's really Ukasa Graniosa.
This is how they rewrite us out of history, Moors.
Right here.
On multiple levels.
Right here.
So from Moors to Negro to black to color.
Right.
It's the same thing with Ukasa Graniosa. That sounds that has a whole different vibration than James Albert.
Twice you've referred to the Negroes as the so-called Negroes. Twice you've referred to the Negroes as the so-called Negroes. You find some fault with this description, I gather.
Mr. Muhammad teaches us that Negro is a term that was applied to us during slavery
by the slave master.
Right.
Which is why it was important to strip the names.
So they
and
change
give
the
Moors
name.
nom de guerres, and then call Moors things that they're not.
Right.
African American, Negro, Black.
And
this
look
is
at
a part of the strategy.
Look at this. Was born in what? Present-day Nigeria around 1705. So that lets you know that Nigeria wasn't called that.
Exactly.
That's a corporate veil put on the land where Nigeria is. Now, this happened around 17... Right, niggers, right.
But now look.
1705. Kidnapped he was. He was kidnapped and shipped to Barbados. Now, he was kidnapped and named James Albert. See what I'm saying? Put a name on him. Right? He was shipped to Barbados. He was purchased by a Calvinist minister who converted him to what? Christianity.
Colonists didn't identify themselves as white. They identified themselves as Englishmen or Christians.
I want Christianity to have a strong flavor. Why did we ever pass a thing like that?
Moors and Christians.
I already know what the Christianity's intent is, to kill all those who wouldn't convert. That's the intent. It's right in the Intercartera Divina, 1493. You can see it. It's documented.
Right.
So he taught him, this guy who kidnapped him, how to read and write, and then he freed him in 1747. That's when he published a biography to support his struggling family and expose racial discrimination. Now, that's 1747. That's a rare book right there, right? Perhaps because he was beholden to the man who sponsored him, who also was the man who kidnapped him and taught him Christianity. He was not critical of the slave trade. His work served as propaganda for the slave trade.
Word. Cool. Hold on, say that again.
The first object which saluted my eyes when I arrived on the coast was a slave ship.
And you can't touch the shores unless you down. Do a treaty with us and we entreat that you trust and respect our boundaries.
Waiting for its cargo. Alaruda Equiano, 1789. This is advice to a Christian that's supposed to be pure. Right here. Oh, ye nominal Christians.
I'm a good Christian, and I'm leading with evangelicals.
Might not an African ask you, don't you this from your God, who says unto you, do unto all men as you would men should do unto you. Because, that's Aliudu Ikuana again in 1789. Because it was the Christians that was allowing the slavery to happen.
European nation.
See, and that's it.
Men such as England, partnered one of the largest slave trading houses in colonial North America, transformed their profits into position and power.
The child is based on the mother. The rule says Virginia Civil Code 1662. They adopted that fact because here's the question that was asked: whether the child was by any Englishman upon a Negro woman should be slave or free be enacted. Children shall be held bond or free according to the condition of the mother.
Power greater than any on earth, one who loves his children and meant them to be free.
Children shall be held bond or free according to the condition of the mother.
James Baldwin once wrote, "For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it always must be heard." For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it always must be heard.
I'll tell you a story, if I may. Many years ago, when I first came to London, I was in the British Museum, naturally, and one of the West Indians who worked there struck up a conversation with me and wanted to know where I was from. And I told him I was from Holland. And that answer didn't satisfy him. And I didn't understand what he meant. I was born in Harlem. I was born in Harlem Hospital, I said. I was born in New York. None of these answers satisfied him. He said, "Where was your mother born?" And I said, she was born in Maryland.
Children shall be held bound or free according to the condition of the mother.
And I could see, though I didn't understand it, that he was going more and more disgusted with me. His tone became more and more impatient. And where was your father born? My father was born in New Orleans. Yes, he said, but man, where were you born? And then I began to get it. You know, I said, well, my mother was born in Maryland, my father was born in New Orleans, I was born in New York. He said, but before that, where were you born? And I had to say, I don't know. I could see that he did not believe me. And I tried to explain, you know, there's no way for me. He said, don't you care enough to find out?
Children shall be held bound or free according to the condition of the mother.
The older children help the younger children. Number two, we were absolutely not integrated with modern Europeans. Number three, we were way smarter. Number four, we were way more confident and secure. And my conclusion is we need to go back to that. Because the only reason that you have people in these institutions calling themselves teachers when the last thing they're doing is teaching. They get to get in there and get at your babies for a paycheck. These people, some of them, have no business having access to the children.
Well, they're telling you the truth in this particular piece of history, but they're not teaching this history in the schools.
No, right.
Oh, no.
Right.
Put it together real quick.
So, like, for those who might consider homeschooling their children, would you suggest this? This would be it, right? One of many places, but
one of many. But there's so much here to get the truth aligned about the immigration of modern Europeans to this American continent. North, South, Central, and the adjoining.
Because one of the things that I have found is that children intuitively and naturally, they love to learn.
All Asiatics of America and hear the truth about your nationality and birthright. Because you're not Negro, black color, or Afro-Opinion. Learn from your Ethiopian. Ethiopian. Learn from your forefathers and exit and a divine creed that you may learn to love instead of hate. Prophet Naba Drew Ali.
Until somebody comes along and discourages them, and they don't want to learn no more. And it's very easy to do in this system of discouragement that they have set up today that is called a school. It's absolutely foreign. Because when you look at our history, we're Moorish, right? Are we all Moors here? Y'all know y'all Moors, right?
Boom. Our international and national law. Your condition is your mother, not your father.
Because they intrinsically knew that that's still mama.
Yep.
Like I said, if that wasn't the case, then they wouldn't be putting their pride and joy, the progenitors for their bloodline, and their family scions on her breast. Right? To get the genetic, right? Because like I said, all the books you read in about science come from the 1800s that are telling you what these Europeans knew. None of the shit they're dealing with now is new information. No. They went and got the old information, so the old information comes from older information. Meaning that in the 1600s, 17 to 1800s, they knew about the genetic exchange that colostrum fluid, breast milk, and all of that was bearing on the child, and the child being reared to a particular point where it has just strength. And the genetics and they're dealing with her, and she got the mitochondria.
The children shall be held bond or free according to the condition of the mother.
They knew that.
Right.
So them scientists knowing that, giving you all of the falseness afterwards with eugenics, but them scientifically knowing what they knew, then you got to understand, they had to have a relationship with her to allow her to rear the baby, not through raising him like they doing in Park Slope and shit, pushing carriages. No, we're talking breast milk. Okay, we're talking colostrum fluid, formulating his brain, giving the calcium and the nutrients for his bone, creating his whole a structure, his being. His blueprint. She was responsible for that. That's what they trusted her with.
And this is what happened when patriarchy came in. It destroyed the nature's law of matriarchy. Based on what your mother, you are what your mother is, not what your father is. So this is what that was supported.
Right.
Those facts.
Absolutely. True indeed.
And that still holds today.
Yeah.
Enslaved men, women, and children often worked in a variety of trades. As domestics, craftsmen, stock workers,
Yes.
and local vendors.
All right, come on, we can.
You're gonna like this one.
Africans had more opportunities.
Only by you're gonna love this. Only by fixing a perpetual brand. Remember, we got branded.
What did we get branded with?
Negro, colored, and black people.
All right.
You know, because we never was no niggas. That's a word that's used to describe our own wretchedness. And we perpetuate it now because it's dead.
I'm not insulting you, I'm just saying you're dead. That's what Negro and nigger means.
That word's dead. We men and women, we come from the first people on the earth.
We're not Negro colors or black people. We're Native, Aboriginal Americans.
Instead of just American, they said, no, let's not just call them Americans. They should be labeled. Let them know their place, that they're always going to be Africans.
I looked in every phone book in Africa. I didn't find one goddamn prior. I saw one familiar name, J-Bo Walker. I called that up. They say he's in Arizona.
They're always going to be from that continent. No one calls anyone a continental name. I am not black. I'm dark skinned. Yes, who cares? So when I go in class and I sit down and someone wants to share something and they say, as an African American, it's very prideful for them, I realize, but do not label yourself before you start talking. Police and brutality all around the world, they label you. They tell you that African American. When you go to the news, they say African American. Do they call them white Americans? No, but they call you black American. Why do they do that? Because you let them label you. Do not let them label you. Next time when you go to a class, when you go somewhere to speak, do not say as an African American. No, say as an American, because you are an American. And that is it. Not a black American, not a white American, not an Asian one, not a European one, not an African one. Okay? Or South American one, or North American one. Stop labeling yourself. It is just destroying you. And your kids will come up to the same situation.
The children shall be held bond or free according to the condition of the mother.
They're telling you that you do not belong here, but this is your home.
Only by fixing a perpetual brand can a distinction be made.
One of the most terrible things, well, one of the most difficult things, because it is something which one wants to resist, as he has said, and also to use, is that, in fact, whether I like it or not, I am an American. Now, that is not, I'm not Lyndon Johnson, and I'm not saying that as, I am an American. I don't mean that, no. Alas, I mean something very different.
Excuse me.
Free Negroes offspring, free Negroes offspring, and the descendants of a who? Englishmen.
What?
So they had to brand you.
Would you mind telling me what your father's last name was?
My father didn't know his last name. My father got his last name from his grandfather, and his grandfather got it from his grandfather, who got it from the slave master. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery.
Was there any line, any point in the genealogy of your family when you did have to use the last name, and if so, what was it?
The last name of my forefathers was taken from them when they were brought to America and made slaves. And then the name of the slave master was given, which we refuse. We reject that name today.
You mean you won't even tell me what your father's supposed last name was or gifted last name was?
I never acknowledge it whatsoever.
What?
So they had to brand you, the Negro, to call them black.
So these are keys that are important to understand when you play suits. Because if you play suit in a fraudulent position, the suit really has no jurisdiction, no power in the jurisdiction, because it's subordinate to one who owns it. It, not you, it.
Only by fixing a perpetual branch can a distinction be made.
Because Negro, black, and colored was coined by the European sons in order to distinguish human chattel property from the human family who had national names like every other civilized being.
What?
So they had to brand you, the Negro, to call them black.
But this one is going to blow your mind.
Okay, tell me how you came to get such a Roman name as that. Tell me how you came to get such a Roman name as that. Tell me how you came to get such a Roman name as that.
Well, as I understand, I'm Cassius Marcellus Clay VI, and my great-great-grandfather was a Kentucky slave, and he was named after some great Kentuckian. Well, Cassius Marcellus Clay is a great name in Kentucky. And really, where he was from, or where it was all originated, I couldn't tell you. But since I've reached a little fame in boxing, most people want to know where am I from and where did I get that name. But really, I haven't really checked on it, so I see that I'm going to have to go look in the
You'll have to look it up.
See what it's all about now that I'm getting a little interviews.
Why don't you like to be called Clay anymore?
No, Clay was not my name.
So keep these things in mind, because it's very important when it comes to the point of protecting your Moorish birthright. If you're forced to sue, that you be in your proper person, which is also why Drew Ali reminded the Moors before this thing even came, when this thing fell all apart, he says, if you don't do anything else, declare your nationality, be yourselves. Of course, you all know, those of you who know law, know that being yourself in law is in propria persona sui juris. All right?
Why don't you like to be called Clay anymore?
No, Clay was not my name.
So when you see that, you know that that's being yourself.
Once we follow the, believe, hear, understand the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and come into knowledge of ourselves, then we want to be called after names of our people.
And so this museum provides context for the debates.
Who's that quote?
William Gooch. In this museum, so far I'm finding that it's just like astrology. When you look at the astrology wheel, what you see is based on what you know. Same here. They have sayings that are, sprinkled throughout that are actually facts and recorded. But based on what you know, for instance, here, the one we just did about having the blind cultures throughout colonial North America, more like a Negro country than a country settled by.
While all the colonies held enslaved people, the systems of slavery varied.
1737.
In most
Sundry Free Moors.
Sundry Free Moors Act and all the activity going on right now with the Moors and North Carolina.
Yeah.
A few Africans in America.
This is why they justified in Charlotte for rising up. So they right there in the right spot, downtown Charlotte.
The Moors and North Carolina.
Yeah.
A few Africans in America.
All right, so I'm going to welcome Sister Kadira L. Bay
who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Me and my husband have been together for over 13 years, and I would like to introduce his book. I'm Kadira Elbay, and we have a bookstore. It's called Cultural Freedom Books, and this book is the First World Order, and it talks about how we weren't all just slaves.
Look at that. Slavery was not based on perceptions of race.
Some of us were already here. This book has 419 pages and it is $100. You can get it from the website at draleemelbay.com. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my husband, Dr. Aleem Elbay.
Moorish in North Carolina.
Yeah.
A few Africans in America.
All right. Make sure everybody can hear me. Is that I'm good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna get into know your roots, know thyself, and this is gonna go pretty deep, like Tanya said. So I'm gonna try to put in and fill in some pieces here of general history, because my major was also history. So let me give myself.
Limited.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, going back to the
On
history.
large plantations, enslaved people.
So look, check this out too, right? Because
This enabled them to maintain cultural
when they
practices,
was challenging,
create new
like Dred Scott and all of that, right?
in large
They
port
like,
cities like Charleston.
well, you know,
Amsterdam,
you can't say, basically, they couldn't
enslaved
tell them
men,
what to
women,
do
and children
outside of this
often worked in a variety
geographical
of
boundary
trades.
right here. Just those 13 colonies
Craftsmen,
was the only,
and local vendors.
and they,
6, 7, 8,
but,
9, 10,
In bustling
12,
cities,
13,
free and
yeah,
enslaved
but look,
Africans had more
the
opportunities
Europeans really didn't have jurisdiction over that.
and share in
But everybody knew, like, you ain't got no, you have zero say so
small
outside of that.
and
You know what I mean?
often formed close
Right. You know what I
relationships with
mean?
American Indians.
So they didn't respect them having territorial jurisdiction in other areas.
Empire Monday, if you say the Empire Monday, it was not separation for the border before. If you say the Empire Monday, it was not separation for the border before.
Because they didn't have it, and they still don't.
And rebelled together.
Yeah.
Where you from, brother?
North America, bro.
North
yeah, I like that.
North America.
That's right.
You feel what I'm saying?
You in the beast.
I don't even subscribe to the colonization of this land no more. You feel what I'm saying? Because they didn't have it, and they still don't.
And rebelled together.
Yeah. You said when Nicaea?
Very nice. They was church day people. Very nice.
Right.
Until the colonization came, it changed everything. By law.
Yes. Same thing happened here with the Pilgrims when they came here. Colonization divided us up, make us think we're different people, that, you know, our empires didn't expand across the great Atlantic. You know what I mean? But it's a beautiful thing to know that it did, and to see our brethren in their cultural garb.
And Africans became black, and Africans became black, and Africans became black, and Africans became black.
The word black, it goes back to English, and we're not Englishmen. We're not English women, though we speak the language. Because it's like this. I could speak Chinese, that would never make me Chinese.
And Africans became black in colonial North America, in colonial North America, in colonial North America.
Wow. Just caught that.
The race-based system of slavery was cemented into law. It was fundamental to the growing colonial economy and would prove instrumental
Did you just hear what he
in the
said?
founding of the United States.
Africans became black.
I know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I know.
It's right in here.
I know. They're talking about endangered European slaves as well. They were both slaves. That's
Yeah, we've seen these pictures.
When Africans arrived in colonial North America, they encountered different environments and varied.
Where did we see the sadness, Carolina?
From rocky coastline.
Where did we see the sadness, Carolina?
From rocky coastline. From rocky coastline. From rocky coastline. From rocky coastline.
Almost want to say I saw this in Nature Knows No Color Line, but I don't think it's in there. It's somewhere on the internet, though.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Let me get this.
Cultivated the land, building profitable plantations with together. While all the colonies held enslaved people, the systems of slavery varied. In most instances, the condition of slavery
check this out.
defined.
Maroon settlement. You want to read that for the people?
Oh, wow. Enslaved Africans in Cuba, like those on other islands and in North America, escaped when possible and formed maroon or runaway societies. Over generations, these communities defend themselves from Greek enslavement and developed a distinctive culture. So those were like the ones who didn't convert to
the El Yangas of the world.
Yeah, like Ayanga for the North American, and that's in the island.
Cujos, many others.
Like you said, I'm Cujo Adwell. I'm one of the grand chiefs of the Moorish movement. With regard to the importance of Moorish history, it's the most neglected history of our people.
Okay, let me ask, before you go any further, who were the Moors?
If we look at it from a historical perspective,
yes,
the Moors are basically any dark-skinned people that had power across the planet. They might have had different names at different times: Cushites, ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, Phoenicians, but the culmination of those people in modern times, their name is Moors.
Okay.
They took that name away and replaced that with Negro, Black, Colored, all the names that are a fiction, which is why today we're combating the fraud of Black history, because Black history is really Moorish history.
Yeah.
Shout out, she.
They're like, we're good.
Free and enslaved Africans had more
Now, sometimes when I see these red flags,
and share in
I assume they're missing the red star. I mean the green star. I don't know.
Well, there's different flags. The continental flag didn't have the green star. Well, it had the green.
They labored, lived.
I wonder if there's anywhere in here they would show it. It had the African.
As the new nation continued to wrestle with slavery and freedom, African Americans.
But as the demands for the British offered enslaved men their freedom in return for service. The Continental Army soon followed. Freedom by any means was the order of the day. So what was who were the British fighting is what you need to think about, because they were trying to keep slavery.
Yeah.
Dunmore. Who's Dunmore?
The first that we'll talk about is Dunmore's proclamation. James Murray, Earl of Dunmore, was governor of Virginia during 1775, and during that year had been embroiled in a number of conflicts with Virginia colonists, in particular dealing with the gunpowder that he'd removed from the storehouse early in April. By the time that we get to the fall, the conditions were so bad that Dunmore was forced to evacuate the palace in Williamsburg and take up residency aboard a ship in the Chesapeake Bay. It's going to be from that ship that Dunmore is going to issue his proclamation, which did two things. First and foremost, it's going to declare martial law. But secondly, and most important for our question, is that Dunmore is going to issue an offer of freedom for indentured servants as Negroes, as African Americans were called during those times.
Most of you Negroes. I'm not insulting you, I'm just saying you're dead. That's what Negro and nigger means.
Who belonged to the Virginia Patriots. So here we have a clearly articulated offer for freedom, for independence, if these people who belong to Virginians would pick up arms and come and fight for the British. Now, one of the questions that's important here is, why did Lord Dunmore do this? Was he an abolitionist? Was he seeking to end slavery altogether? The short answer is no. What you need to understand about Dunmore's proclamation is that he issued this as a military strategy in order to disrupt what was happening behind enemy lines, in this case with the Virginia Patriots. So there was no long-term desire on his part to free enslaved African Americans. It should be noted, though, as a result of Dunmore's proclamation, we know that hundreds of thousands of African Americans are going to flock to the British lines, and many of them will be able to find their freedom as a result of this. The next document that I wanted to discuss actually points to some evidence, evidence of an African American who took up Dunmore on his proclamation and decided to go and fight for the British.
Troops and local seamen exploded onto the streets of Boston in 1770. At the helm was Crispus Attucks, a 47-year-old sailor and fugitive slave. He became the first casualty in the Boston Massacre, and his act of defiance marked the beginning of the march toward revolution. By April 1775, Massachusetts militiamen clashed with British troops, launching the Revolutionary War.
Before the Revolution, many Africans were already experienced seamen on merchant vessels. Due to a shortage of manpower, both the Continental and Royal Natives signed Africans into service early in the conflict. During the war, they served in a variety of capacities, piloting vessels, building ships, and managing ammunition on board. Well, the true question is, why were they already experienced seamen? Because they've been seamen for a long time.
Go back to the Phoenicians, Moorish sea rovers on the British, like, you know.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, we learned a lot in school about 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and all that stuff, but you know what? There were Africans before Columbus, and we've got Dr. David Imhotep to tell us his history lesson that we need to know. Welcome, Dr. Imhotep. And I should say, you have a PhD in ancient African history.
That's correct.
And that's kind of unusual.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. How did you get interested in this area?
It was part of my dissertation led this way, but I could not vary to another subject when my other subject here. So I said, later on I will write something about that because it's not important in my dissertation at this moment. So that's why I did the book as soon as I finished my dissertation.
Wow, and we should say, we have a picture of the book too, and it's the first Americans were Africans, and we were talking about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima because I remember back in the 1980s, my dad took me to hear him. He came here to Cincinnati, and his book was They Came Before Columbus, and he talked about you know, how Africans were here. He had a lot of, I mean, great research information, and so it was just kind of eye-opening, but we haven't heard a lot about that recently, so tell us how you got involved here.
Well, I'm showing that Africans not only came before Columbus, they came before the Indians.
So you're going even farther back.
I'm going farther back, at least 56,000 years old.
Okay, now we've got a graphic up here about 130,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, they sailed over here. And when I lecture, people say, well, wait a minute, humans weren't sailing, let alone they weren't boating 130,000 years ago. And I beg to differ. Last year, New York Times quoted the BBC, and they wrote an article on how in Crete they have found a stone industry of stone tools going back to at least 130,000 years. And Crete has been an island in the middle of the Mediterranean for 5 million years. So they had to sail, and it was a continuous civilization, which means they were going back and forth. They knew how to navigate. So if they got to Crete 130,000 years ago, it's easy 70,000 years later that they could make it to the Americas at 56,000 years ago.
Right.
America was already in.
Say that again?
How does this be the founding of America when it was already, well, it wasn't called America, but America. But how did they come to find it? You see what I'm saying?
All right, so real quick, you know.
This is the section right there on the wall. Okay, real quick, come over this way.
Kunta Kinte was running his ass off, and Kunta said, I got to be free. They cut off his foot. Kunta was like this, fuck it. They cut off both his shit. He just...
Yes, African Americans have felt the cold weight of shackles and the stinging lash of the field whip, but we've also dared to run north.
As the colonies move towards war. Now, everybody knows the colonies was trying to become free from something British. Move towards war and revolt or revolution. The Continental Congress appointed a committee of men to draw up a statement about why independence was necessary. Now think, critical thinking, people. If the colonies are trying to be free and the Continental Congress already exists, it's right here.
Now, I want to show you a painting of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Here's the Battle of Bunker Hill. Bunch of white guys, right? Unless you know where to look. Right here. That's Peter Salem. He was actually the hero of the battle. It doesn't look like he's a hero there. He looks like he's cowering behind the white guy with a sword. He was the hero of the battle. And he saved scores of American lives that day. Why don't we know this? Look here. African American, helping row the boat across. You know what his name was? Prince Whipple. He fought alongside Washington during the Revolution.
It's right here. It already exists. Continental Congress. So, Moors, when you have that continental flag, that's what it's representing.
So what's the significance of the Continental Congress existing before?
Because many people think that there was no government or no activity or anything of that nature here in the North American continent until the what they call the founding of America. They're only giving their perspective of the story. And so this is what people believe, but it tells you right there. The colonies moved towards a war and revolution.
This painting of, this is the Marquis de Lafayette.
Without the French Navy and without Lafayette, we wouldn't be a republic.
If you look at this, you just think, oh yeah, and then he made his slave dress up like I don't know what. But that's what you would think, right? This guy is incredibly important. This guy may have won the Revolutionary War. James Armistead was his name. How did he win the Revolutionary War? Double spy. I'm going to let David tell the story here in a minute, but basically the Brits thought that he was spying for them, but he was spying for General Washington. He'd give the Brits bad intel and reveal the good critical information to General Washington. Did you know this story? Why?
Without the French Navy and without Lafayette, we wouldn't be a republic.
I'm so tired of people saying, well, it was just the white people, white people, white people. No. No, why are we intentionally leaving others out?
And the Continental Congress appointed. So it already existed. And you can go to the Articles of Association that proves it, that these colonies came to the Continental Congress on September the 5th, 1774 in Philadelphia. So it already existed, the Continental Congress. So the only significance is for people to realize that there was government going on already.
Absolutely.
That's all.
The first 26 congressmen up on that hill of color were all Republicans. Do you think they teach that?
Right, I never went to school in this country.
They don't.
That's why,
But
I don't
now,
know.
I appreciate.
But they should, right?
But they should, because when you're saying of color, do you mean like melanated people, my skin complexion? Because everybody has a nationality. To be specific, like, you know what I mean?
If I put my hand on the back of his poster, you're going to discover immediately I'm not white.
Hold on, say that again, bro. My fault.
I am not white.
Colonists didn't identify themselves as white. They identified themselves as Englishmen or Christians.
foundation,
Real talk.
which is called Let's Move.
See?
And it
Absolutely,
just
I
gives,
totally respect that.
Now, put your hand
on your shirt, by your shirt.
Yes.
I'm not black.
There you go.
I know
Now you're
that.
getting it.
No, I know that. What's those papers right there?
Okay. No. And in the before we move to that, it says here, 6 men, a committee of 6 men to draw up a statement about the independence was necessary. Well, if you read the Articles of Association, that explains why they needed their independence. It's right. It's a 1-page, 1.5-page document. It's on the site, also on Forgotten Scrolls page. So Thomas Jefferson, he took the lead. Now you need to read the letter between Tom and Ben Banneker. You'll see.
Benjamin Banneker was one such figure who did not hesitate to challenge the government to live up to its creed. He was raised as a free person of color in the state of Maryland, where his grandmother taught him to read and write. As a child, he developed an interest in mathematics and mechanics, and soon became accomplished in clockmaking, astronomy, and surveying. In 1791, Banneker assisted Major Andrew Ellicott in surveying the new federal city that would become Washington, D.C.
Egyptian architecture is all over D.C. It's everywhere. It's in Malcolm X Meridian or Meridian Hill Park, whatever you call it. It's in the buildings all around the mall. It's everywhere, you know. So, of course, our history goes way beyond the term of African American. You know, our history is much longer than this museum could possibly capture, probably than anyone could possibly capture. You know,
like I said before, if we take a step back and say, hold on, our contribution is bigger than this museum. Okay, we built the whole thing. Benjamin Banneker, Bay, laid the math out of this place.
He rose to prominence by publishing an almanac based on his own calculations. Banneker was long aware of Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson's views about blacks. Proud of his African heritage and confident in his abilities, on August 19, 1791, Banneker wrote Jefferson, including a copy of his almanac. He cordially reminded Jefferson that during the Revolution, he, Jefferson himself, called slavery an evil. How could Jefferson now support an institution he had once said he abhorred? Banneker wrote, "This, sir, was a time when you clearly saw into the injustice of a state of slavery, and in which you had just apprehensions of the horror of its condition. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Sir, how pitiable is it to reflect that you should at the same time be found guilty of that most criminal act which you professedly detested in others with respect to yourselves." Jefferson wrote Banneker back, briefly thanked him for his letter, but failed to answer Banneker's questions regarding slavery. Jefferson, like most whites, quickly cast aside the contributions of African Americans in winning independence from England. Jefferson replied, "Sir, I thank you sincerely for your letter. Nobody wishes more than I do to see such proofs you exhibit. Talents equal to the other colors of men, and that the appearance of a want of them is owing merely to the degraded condition of their existence, both in Africa and America. I can add with truth that nobody wishes more ardently to see a good system commenced for raising the condition of both their body and mind to what it ought to be. I am with great esteem, sir, your most obedient, humble servant, Thomas Jefferson." Banneker published the exchange in future editions of the Almanac, thus lending black and white abolitionists with another reference for their anti-slavery arguments.
And the committee revised his work. Jefferson labored to define what freedom was and why separation from who? England. This is proof that they themselves were trying to be separated from the British. Oh, right. On American land, though. Okay. From England was necessary. As a slave owner, tyranny was not an abstract idea. Read the letter from Benjamin Banneker to Jefferson and you'll understand, because he decided that maybe it's a good idea to enslave the people after they got their freedom.
Indeed. What we're working with right here.
Now right here, this looks like the Declaration of Independence handwritten.
that. Wake up, America. I love you. Now, what would you say is the most important part about the Declaration of Independence?
Freedom.
Freedom?
For all.
For all.
Life,
For all.
liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Right.
For all.
That's all this is about.
We're all created equal.
There you go. There
Amen.
you go.
And you're my brother.
All right.
Yeah, draft of the Declaration.
Can you read what's at the top?
Yes, it says, a declaration for, a declaration by.
No, at the top.
Determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. The king, that's England, they wanted to keep slavery, remember that. But the slaves were the modern Europeans, not us. The king is now exciting those very people to rise in arms amongst us. That's right, because they never wanted them to be free. That's why. Draft of the Declaration of Independence, but it does say a declaration of the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. So if they're asking for freedom and they didn't have it, the General Congress assembled was already assembled.
So what we're looking at right now is hold up, let me get the aberration right. All right, so this paper right here is the handwritten draft.
Oh, it says here, let's look at this. Oh, wow. Jefferson included discussions of slavery in the rough draft of the Declaration of Independence, but the drafting committee cut the subject from the document rather than call attention to the contradiction that slavery existed in a land founded on independence. Now, this is interesting. This is out of the Library of Congress. This is interesting because, again, I take you to the letter from Benjamin Banneker to Thomas Jefferson. That's where he's telling them, hey, man, what are you talking about? You just won freedom yourself from that infamous all men are created equal. You're looking at my brethren to put them back in slavery. So that ties this truth in, all right? That's why he addressed it.
No, just...
Let's switch sides.
Yeah, thank you.
So Jefferson wasn't all that great after all, huh?
Jefferson professed to hate slavery, called it an abominable crime, but he held on to his slaves. He freed only 7.
The author of the Declaration of Independence, who wrote that all men are created equal, owned 600 slaves over his lifetime, and in addition to his legitimate children, almost certainly fathered at least 6 other children with his slave, Sally Hemings.
For generations, descendants of Sally Hemings have been telling stories implicating Jefferson as father of her children.
DNA proof of a connection came in 1998.
When in the course of human events.
This is his handwritten draft. Oh my God, this is amazing stuff here.
But as far as the masses are concerned, is that because it is based in divine law, the consequence of violating the Constitution, the retort, the recompense, the revenge is based in nature, not in you. So if they violate the law, you violate the law, Constitution law, it's already set in the atmosphere. So you can play games all you want to. That's what makes the United States really so unique, not what they've been telling you. Because this government was set up on the principle of isonomy. And that is divine law. And the keys to it is set up also in the Declaration of Independence. Nature's God and nature's law. And don't you think it's not?
For depriving of the benefit of trial by jury. Look, if you notice, the interesting thing is, if you notice that they're talking about their reasons, and they say for depriving us of the benefits of trial by jury, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent,
Stood there in front of them people for 2 hours, and they gave me my money back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because they was enforcing a federal tax law, but I'm showing you a document where this is coming from Congress, and it's stating that the IRS is no part of the federal government. So how y'all automatically taking money from me? And you see my allodial. Do you know what allodial stands for? Or allodial? No, they don't. So I had to educate them for 2 hours. Then I had to hit the hammer on them with the peace treaty. That was it. And followed up with Hillary and Obama, both repeating it, and I got him following along, like reading along as I'm playing it on my phone and I'm showing him.
And you did this in Richmond?
I did this at the resort. I got documentations and everything at the resort. 2 hours. They had to get on the phone and call the people up and to do the high people up. Only one person can, because the AA 222141. Right. Only one person can authorize that because it's not exempt. It's non-obligated.
We're imposing taxes on us without our consent.
So you're not, you're not obligated to it. So they didn't understand it. But when he got on that phone and called up there, it was no problem. Right.
Islam, noble, travel well and safe.
Yes, sir, you too, brother.
These are all the reason they wanted to be free. Well, you know who did that? That was the British, who had them in slavery here.
This is Thomas Jefferson's laptop desk. This is the desk upon which he wrote early drafts of the Declaration of Independence.
The first of those drafts attacked Britain's slave trade, Jefferson writing that King George III has waged cruel war against human nature itself. The Continental Congress took the phrase out. Alongside the rejected passage, the financial reality.
Next to it is his farm book, and here is where he would list the births and deaths of the slaves. He would list the work that they did. So in some ways, it really gives us a full picture of the totality of Jefferson.
But the thing is, in the closeness of the slavery situation is right after they, and really right before they actually got their independence. If you watch the movie, what's it called, of a Negro? Book of Negroes. You'll see in that documentary that while slavery is trying to be given to these modern Europeans here, they decide they're going to become slave masters. So it starts to interweave itself. You know, right? You have to know these things and you catch it.
Yes. The struggles for freedom that took place made our Constitution a real and living document.
It's a beautiful thing to know the law. It really is. And I know that you're outside of law because you're acting outside of constitutional fold of government.
Tested.
The point of this mission is the enforcement of our Constitution.
And shaped and deepened and made more profound its meaning for all people.
During the 1830s, Isaac Franklin and John
Now look, hey, check this out. Look at how big, when they first colonized our land, look at how big Georgia was.
Yeah.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
How big Virginia.
It's called annexing. Just so you can say, oh, that's right.
But that's what I was saying before. Tennessee, what they call in Tennessee, in North Carolina. I mean, because it's all, before the Pilgrims came here, this was all one land. Didn't have these names, these colonial names. So I would say the decolonization starts mentally with your connection to the land. Like
this particular corporation that we call a country has subjects and citizens that are the least informed persons on this planet. This country has what you call the most staunch control of the media, but it appears to have the most liberal media in the world. And it really doesn't. At the end of the day, by the time we're done today, you're going to have a better clue of what that's about. Now, this is what the deal is. The people that are the true Americans in this country call themselves African American, Negro, Black, colored people. Now, one of the things they wanted me to share with you guys.
Are you mentally connected to the land?
Yes.
Territory claimed by Spain, because all of that was Mexico.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
All of that was Mexico. Yeah. That's why they call our brothers and sisters Spanish when they're not.
In other words, these people have been mistaught. They think that Spain is their motherland, when in reality their motherland is Africa. Their motherland is South America. Your motherland is the Amazon. Your motherland is the Sahara of West Africa, not the mountains of Caucasoid Spain. I mean, it just boggles the mind. I love Spain. I have a great time. I'm there. But if they looked in reality, they would realize that, yes, colonization was done. But at the same time, these people were busy colonizing themselves for thousands of years. They were busy enslaving each other way before they even ventured into the slave trade, back when the slave trade was still run by Middle Easterners, by Arabs. So I think that the difference is that we're dealing with reconnection towards our culture.
They from a Mexim, northwest of Mexim at that, you know. This is 1787.
Hey guys, welcome to Hip Fuse History. We're going to giddy up with the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which is kind of a tough vocabulary word for a lot of kids to remember. So let me kind of explain it in historical terms, and then I'm going to give you kind of an easy way to remember it by saying it like this. Oh yeah, it's the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Mama got pregnant, baby. It's ridiculous. So, history first. The concept is this, that under the Articles of Confederation, our first constitution, very little got done. Because it was very hard to pass laws. You needed 9 out of 13 of Congress, 1 vote per state, in order to pass a law, so there's not a lot of laws to study. But on many tests, I know in New York State they asked this question a lot, of one of the successes of the Articles was the passage of this piece of legislation known as the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. So basically what this law does is it is a process for new states joining the Union, territories to become states. So in a sense, it is like the legs of Manifest Destiny. So, you know, if you think of Manifest Destiny as moving forward, I can't move forward without the legs. The legs are the process by which I move forward. So therefore, this law is a formula that allows territories to join as states. So in a sense, it's like the country is expanding. So to the point, oh yeah, it's the Northwest Ordinance 1787, Mama got pregnant. The concept is that the country, in a sense, is getting pregnant with new states. So when I say it all funny-like, you are kind of thinking, I'm hoping, that the United States is birthing new states and growing. We're manifest destinizing ourselves, we're moving westward, and we're accumulating new states out of those territories. So I'd like to apologize to the Native Americans for the Northwest Ordinance of 1787.
But look.
So when the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was signed, right, like all of these colonies, that wasn't what was going on at the time. You still had the Northwest Territory.
Yeah. Look at the Yamasees and the Seminoles down in the Spanish Florida. Look, they say Spanish Florida. What the heck's that mean, right?
I'm here to talk about my new book, which is called The Moor's Account, and it's based on the true story of the first black explorer of America. He was a Moroccan slave who was part of the Narvaez expedition of 1528. It's an expedition that landed in Florida in the vicinity of what is now Tampa Bay, and its goal was to claim the Gulf Coast for the Spanish crown. But from the moment it landed, that expedition faced many challenges. It was ill-fated in every possible way. And within a year, there were only 4 survivors.
Yeah, and then all of these are some other areas. Because remember, at Alice Island, they said they found over 200 cultures. That's 200 families at minimum.
They got all the Aboriginal family appellations. And these Saponas, Shawnees.
Now, who restricts the rights of African Americans? All states, not territories. See this? You got to read Article 3 of the Constitution because it mentions There's a difference between states and territories.
Yeah.
Now, a national
territories
domicile is the whole
are not
America.
claimed by states. That's why, like, or quasi-national domiciles.
Exactly.
You
And
know
this
what I mean?
proves it.
Because that's you dealing with natural law, the earth, the land itself.
Here it says all states
Yeah.
restrict the rights of African Americans.
Yeah.
Well, what is that? This is just a geography area, a sales territory. For their, that's all that it is. Because the whole thing is a national domicile.
Yeah.
And all of this is working on top of it. But I want you to see the Constitution. You can't really see it.
Yeah. We're going to get to another floor before we lose all time. I'm not sure, but we already know our meeting up spot if we get separated.
Join us in ringing a bell from the First Baptist Church in Virginia, one of the oldest black churches in America, founded under a grove of trees in 1776. And the sound of this bell will be echoed by others in houses of worship and town squares all across this country. An echo of the ringing of bells that signaled emancipation more than a century and a half ago. The sound and the anthem of American freedom.
I became, this came to my attention because of the cotton situation we've always had.
Say that again?
Because of the cotton, when we went down to the oldest cotton plantation.
Yeah, that was crazy at the Shirley Plantation. All right, so out here, so-called Virginia, family, I'm literally on a so-called historical plantation right now. It's called Shirley's Plantation, okay? Shirley's Plantation. All of the white that you see on the ground looking like snow, that's actually cotton, okay? 2016, we here, that's cotton. This is cotton.
Right. That's in the country. So why is our people going down south now? Yeah. Because it's supposed to be like that. Don't cry.
Right.
Don't cry.
Right.
This shit don't work for us.
Right.
Give it to them. I don't want to be in the. I don't really need to be in a city like that anymore.
But you know what's ill, Red?
Yeah.
That's how it originally was. We was on the land, and the cities, the original ghettos, was for the Europeans.
You already know.
Okay. Real cotton. So. We here, you know what I'm saying? Look at this. What's that? Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm gonna make a t-shirt with this. You know what I mean? Yeah. Ah, yeah.
So it says the expansion of the cotton empire cemented slavery into American society and the economy.
Producing is tied into reproduction.
Yes.
Producing is tied into produce.
Yeah.
So you're not producing produce. Black people, African American, Negro, colored, whatever you want to call yourself. You're not even producing produce.
Ah, yeah.
So it says the expansion of the cotton empire cemented slavery into American society and the economy.
Where's produce being produced? In the rural places. Where's manufacturing taking place? In rural areas, not in cities. Warehouses and things of that nature take place in rural towns. We have to now have reverse exodus. Exodus meaning that there was an exodus from the country or the rural life into the city or to the metropolis. Fast forward, it became a killing field. It won't work anymore. Like
the Europeans took our science, our mathematics, our master astrology, and ruled the world. We took on his idol god religions and fell. That's what your problem is. It's not emotional. It's not racism. It's scientific.
And each new territory raised the stakes. Would it be slave or free? African Americans responded by enacting new visions of American
Let me
freedom.
get some elbow.
Year by year, state by state, territory by territory, African Americans used the press.
I just realized that you should stop calling yourself an African American. You should stop calling yourself Black American. These are all things that are labeling to you. They label you. They tell you that this is who you are. So when they brought the Go Back to Africa regime, they will always include you in it. You are not African.
All right? Public protest and freedom of movement and freedom of movement and freedom of movement to insist that slavery come to an end.
So you must understand the instruments that are used to maintain the enslavement, because the slave can't be maintained because it's against nature. So the slave must be invited to participate in that construct. A license is an agreement construct for you to stop your waters. Now, from a scientific perspective, if you're going to kill a river and some people live below the flow of the water and you want to take their land, what is one of the things that you do politically in order to stagnate their development and growth? You build a dam, don't you? And you start regulating the water, right? And when you regulate the water that flows free produces fish, feeds the wildlife, nourishes the land, moves the sediment according to the moon to keep nutrients going to the land. When you stagnate it, then you get mosquitoes, leeches, and everything, and the water gets black, doesn't it? And you call it death, don't you? And you can talk that person into selling that land for a little bit of finance, or you can starve them out, can't you? It's called movement. So water that stagnates is called dead water, isn't it? But water that flows is called living water, isn't it? The license is based on that. It is to stagnate your flow. If you can stagnate the flow of a people, you can stagnate their economy. And if you can stagnate their economy, you can stagnate their life. If you stagnate their life, you control their family with just that instrument, and you stand back and just reap in the benefits. That's what the license is for. If you didn't know it now. You need to examine it for what it is.
Together, this combination of words and actions left their mark on the Constitution and on our practice of political participation, deepening and enriching liberty for all.
Now, look. Now, am I wrong? Wouldn't this be a correlation? Read that again. It said freedom of movement.
Yes, it's
all right.
Over there. There's many.
It sound like right to travel to me.
Yeah.
All right. So we're dealing with some of the same matters. Yeah, no problem.
You suppress in public protest.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about right here real quick. The Louisiana.
Let's talk about it. Ooh.
Yeah.
Look.
This is about.
And they styling because some of the so-called purchase went up into Canaanland, but.
Louisiana Purchase was purchased not through bloodshed.
Right.
Purchase was given to them. I'm talking about half of America because of bloodshed, but on their side, they got they got beheaded, and they were getting their ass whooped in Haiti.
Right. They was holding the coast down.
They sold. How many acres was that?
You good.
Yeah, they don't show all of that.
And this is why people need to know geography too.
Look, the inhabitants of the ceded territory shall be incorporated in the Union of the United States and admitted with rights, advantages, and immunities of citizens. Now, hold on. That's really Louisiana Purchase. Well, I won't say that. When we look at it from astro position, you have Virginia, Virgo, and Leo, but that's not what
the purchase, though.
I know that it wasn't, but I'm making the correlations as to why.
The real thing is that ancestral estates can't be brought or sold or transferred. That's the point. You know what I mean?
They can't be bought, sold, or transferred. Now you see how this is Leo. I mean, I'm sorry, I keep saying Leo because Louisiana Purchase, and then underneath is really what was Mexico at the time.
Oh yeah, Amexem, Northwest Amexem. right, so let's, we're going to move to another floor.
Look,
what?
there was a Louisiana Gazette in 1811.
Yeah.
The purchase was in 1803.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we get back. All right, peace and love, Miss Barbara. My question to you, being as though we was all here today at the African American Museum in D.C., how did you feel about this museum? Do you think it was a worthy wait for, or would you suggest that our people come check it out? How do you feel about the experience at the museum?
Wonderful experience.
Okay.
Showed many of the artists and people of our day and age that we know, like Muhammad Ali, Aretha Franklin, Oprah Winfrey. I think it would be a great inspiration for our children to come and see it.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful day. It looks much better than the Philadelphia Museum.
Yeah.
Stay set, sequel in the making. 360, my beliefs in the nation. These twist me, they peep.
You've had 4 of these major impacts that the black people have made to the Americas, not only before Columbus was born, but before even Spain or Italy existed. That's the kind of roots that are in this country. And by knowing that, and the more you know about it, it's an empowerment. You're really rooted. You have got a heritage which is more than slavery. Sure, there was slavery, but that's not all. That's a small part of it. Long before that, there's a heritage of kings, seafarers, religious missionaries, and they were all here. But it happened so long ago, there's just so little of it left.
But some adults have difficulty handling that.
What connects it up is even the word Moor, because it's pronounced differently in different parts of even of Africa. And they call themselves Moor, Mu, Muir. There's all variations of that, so that even the name Muir.
And individuals are missing the point.
People will say, well, big deal, so what? Why is history important at all? History is extremely important. Imagine if I could take from each one of you as an individual everything you knew about life up to last week and just erase it. Where would you be? You'd be lost. You'd be incompetent. You wouldn't know how to plan for the future. And you do the same thing with a people. If you erase their history or you don't tell enough about their past, they also become incompetent and they can't fulfill the future. And that's why a lot of people in the black community have felt, well, how come all of the dreams of the civil rights movement aren't yet fulfilled? And one reason is because this history is still suppressed. It still isn't taught. But there's been a recent discovery which is going to blow the lid off of all that. And that's what I'm going to talk about.
100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. Now, have you ever wondered what that passage meant from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech? I did, and what I found was one of the biggest secrets that's not really a secret at all, except to many African Americans, is they are not descended from Africans.
Dr. King also stated in his I Have a Dream speech that we are held in exile in our own homeland.
100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land.
Now, we have a lot of scholars and etymologists out there, and individuals are missing the point. How can you be held in exile in your own homeland without it being your own homeland?
Moorish Americans are indigenous to America.
I know, I was shocked too, so much so that I asked Africans, and they agreed African Americans weren't Africans. If you don't believe me, Google Arnaldus Montanus America and see the people he saw in 1671. Read books like The Black American Handbook for Survival through the 21st Century by Radine Amin-Ra, What Every African American Should Know by Carrie Davis, and Africans and Native Americans by Jack Forbes. I just can't believe schools aren't teaching this stuff. What a travesty.